They were born from shadows, conceived not for glory, but for silence. Submarines, machines forged in steel, designed to vanish beneath the surface, to become predators unseen. In the beginning, they were nothing more than experiments, fragile coffins stitched together by the imagination of inventors who believed men could wage war from beneath the waves. Their earliest designs were crude, barely capable of descending without drowning their own crew. Yet even in their failures, a terrible idea took root. The ocean could be weaponized, and its depths could be used to stalk the living. By the dawn of the 20th century, that idea had evolved into nightmare. Nations poured their wealth into the creation of undersea hunters, silent engines of war that could glide through black waters unseen. The world's oceans, once barriers between empires, became invisible frontiers. Battles no longer had to be fought on the horizon. They could be waged from beneath, in silence, without warning, without mercy. The First World War gave these machines their trial by fire. German U-boats became specters haunting the Atlantic, striking passenger ships, merchant convoys, and warships with the sudden violence of a torpedo. They altered the very psychology of war, spreading fear where once there had only been strategy. No vessel was safe. Ships that left port under bright skies vanished beneath dark waves, swallowed by unseen predators that left only oil slicks and drifting wreckage. The sea had become an ambush, and the submarine its hidden knife. But the power of the submarine came at a price. Each vessel was a paradox, armed with weapons that could sink battleships, yet fragile as glass under the crushing weight of the sea. A single leak could turn a hunter into a tomb. Engines that faltered left men stranded, oxygen fading, darkness closing in. Those who climbed into these steel beasts did so with the knowledge that survival was never guaranteed. Their strength was silence. Their curse was fragility. The Second World War elevated them from experiment to terror. German wolf packs prowled the Atlantic, their coordination transforming lone hunters into swarms of steel. American submarines stalked the Pacific, cutting the supply lines of the Japanese Empire with ruthless precision. Each ocean became an invisible battlefield where thousands perished without ever seeing the enemy that killed them. The surface of the sea could look calm, but beneath it raged a war that left no witnesses. Submarines became instruments of dread. To those above, they were phantoms, striking without sound, disappearing before retaliation. To those inside, they were cages of iron, stifling, suffocating, filled with the smell of diesel, sweat, and fear. Depth charges thundered from above, rolling down into the abyss, each explosion threatening to split the hull, each groan of the metal reminding the crew that they existed one crack away from death. Yet, despite the terror, nations only built more. Billions were poured into their design, chasing deeper dives, longer patrols, more devastating weapons. The Cold War transformed them further, from hunters of ships into carriers of annihilation itself. Nuclear submarines lurked beneath polar ice, carrying missiles that could erase cities from existence. They became the ultimate paradox, guardians of deterrence, yet themselves vulnerable to the same silence that had haunted their ancestors. But even in their triumph, the same truth lingered. A submarine was not only a weapon, it was also a coffin in waiting. For every submarine that returned triumphant, another vanished into the depths. Some were struck down in battle, others claimed by mechanical failure, others simply disappeared, swallowed whole with not a single signal sent. The ocean kept its secrets, holding the wrecks and their crews in silence, erasing even the possibility of knowing their last moments. The men who sailed them were bound by a terrible pact with the sea. They carried torpedoes and missiles, but also their own mortality, packed into narrow bunks and steel corridors that could become their graves in a single instant. Theirs was a service of silence. Families often told little of where their sons, husbands, and fathers had gone, missions cloaked in secrecy, their losses recorded in vague phrases, missing, presumed lost. As time passed, stories accumulated. Submarines that sailed and never returned. Crews that slipped beneath the waves without a cry for help. Wrecks that, decades later, were found resting on the seabed, their steel hulls sealed, their crews entombed within. And others, still, that remain undiscovered, vanishing into the abyss so completely that not even the most advanced technology has yet found them. The submarine was hailed as a marvel of engineering, a machine that reshaped warfare and redefined oceans. But beneath its legacy lies a deeper truth. It is also the most fragile of weapons. It silenced both its greatest strength and its greatest curse. The ocean gave them power, and the ocean claimed them back. In every nation, the submarine became a symbol of both pride and dread. To serve aboard one was to walk willingly into uncertainty, to live with the knowledge that the sea could claim you without warning, without trace. Generations of sailors carried this burden, their courage measured not only by the battles they fought, but by the silence they endured. Even now, as technology grows and oceans are mapped with satellites and sonar, the legacy of the submarine remains haunted. For each vessel that prowled the depths as a predator, another became prey to the ocean itself. Some rest in shallow waters, remembered by plaques and monuments. Others lie in trenches miles deep, sealed away forever in darkness, their stories untold, their last moments unknown. The tale of the submarine is not merely one of warfare and innovation. It is the story of mankind's attempt to dominate the most merciless frontier on Earth, and the story of how that frontier strikes back. Every innovation brought with it new tragedy. Every victory concealed another loss. The ocean was not conquered. It was appeased for a time by fragile machines of steel that could never truly master it. They were silent hunters, yes, but also hunted by the very element they tried to command. Each submarine carried with it two identities, weapon and coffin. Their silence was their greatest power, but also their doom. And as history would show, many of them did not return to the surface. They vanished without a trace, leaving only rumors, speculation, and the endless silence of the deep. This is where their story begins, where invention met darkness, where nations turned the oceans into battlefields, and where men traded the certainty of death on land for the uncertainty of survival beneath the sea. The submarines that once stalked their prey became the prey of the abyss itself. And the abyss has never given up all its secrets. Beneath the waves lies a world untouched by sunlight, a place where pressure rises with each fathom, crushing with a force that defies comprehension. The ocean, so tranquil at the surface, transforms into an adversary the deeper one descends. Here, at depths where no human body can survive unprotected, the abyss waits. It is patient, it is merciless, and it has claimed more lives than any warship or torpedo. For the men who entered submarines, the ocean was not merely a battlefield, it was a living graveyard. A single hull of steel separated breath from oblivion. With every dive, crews wagered their lives against nature itself. The deeper they went, the more unforgiving the abyss became. At 200 feet, the sea pressed in like a tightening vice. At 500, it groaned against the hull. At 1,000, the margin between survival and annihilation was measured not in inches, but in rivets, welds, and the precision of hands that had built their fragile vessel. No submarine, no matter how advanced, was invincible. A leak the size of a pinhole could become a flood. A cracked valve could unleash a torrent no man could stop. One mistake, a miscalculation in ballast, a navigational error, a faulty gauge, could send a submarine past the point of return, spiraling into the black where no rescue would follow. The abyss is silent. When a submarine is lost to its depths, it does not scream. No flares pierce the surface. No distress call breaks the airwaves. There is only absence. Families wait for word that never comes. Nations record them as missing, and the ocean keeps its secret sealed. These are the silent deaths, where steel coffins sink without farewell, and entire crews vanish without leaving a trace of their final moments. In the years of war, near misses became grim reminders of what awaited. Depth charges rained down from destroyers, forcing submarines to dive deeper than their hulls were meant to endure. Metal bent and screamed as rivets strained, bulkheads shuddered, and the sea pressed harder, harder until survival depended on sheer luck. Some submarines clawed their way back to the surface, scarred and battered, their crews shaken by what they had heard, the deep groaning of the abyss, as though it had almost taken them. Others never returned. The records tell their stories in cold words. Presumed lost, failure to return from patrol, missing cause unknown. But behind those words were men living, breathing sailors who, in a moment, were erased by the weight of water. They did not die in open battle. They did not perish with witnesses. They disappeared. Consider the ocean trenches, black scars carved into the planet's surface. The Mariana Trench plunges deeper than Mount Everest rises. In such places, the pressure is beyond imagining, thousands of pounds upon every square inch. If a submarine falls past its crushed depth, the sea does not wait. In less than a second, the hull implodes, collapsing inward with the violence of a detonation. For those inside, death is instant, bodies extinguished before thought can form. No remains rise. No wreckage floats. The abyss swallows everything. Even in shallower waters, disaster was always near. Engines could fail. Fires could ignite. Carbon dioxide could build unseen until men slipped into unconsciousness, one by one. The ocean has no mercy for accidents. It does not forgive human error. A wrong valve opened, a hatch unsealed, and the deep would surge in like a predator, filling every chamber, dragging every life into silence. The abyss is more than darkness and pressure. It is isolation. A submarine hundreds of miles from shore is already entombed in its own solitude. Radio silence is standard. Secrecy demands it. When contact is lost, no one knows whether it was planned or whether an entire crew has already been claimed. For families, the waiting becomes torture days, stretching into weeks. Each sunrise another reminder that the men they loved may already lie in darkness, unburied, unseen, forgotten. The truth is that the ocean itself became the greatest enemy of submarines. More submarines were lost to the abyss than to direct attack. For every U-boat hunted down in the Atlantic, another slipped away into silence, never firing its last torpedo, never seen again. For every American submarine that crippled enemy convoys in the Pacific, another vanished, its final position marked only by rumor. The sea claimed them with the same indifference with which it claims ships, aircraft, and men. This is the nature of the abyss. It is not cruel, for cruelty implies intent. It is worse, it is indifferent. The abyss does not care how advanced the submarine, how experienced the crew, how desperate their fight for survival. It receives all with the same silence, the same darkness, the same eternal pressure. Occasionally, wrecks are discovered decades later. Steel husks twisted into grotesque shapes, torn apart by implosion, resting on the seabed as if sleeping. Inside, the evidence of lives once lived remains personal items, clothing, notes never delivered. But even these discoveries are rare. For every submarine found, many more remain missing, their resting places hidden by the vastness of the ocean. These silent tombs are not marked by stone or flag. They are guarded by miles of water, unreachable, unseeable. The abyss does not allow for graveside mourning, for flowers, for remembrance. It keeps its dead, holds them in darkness, and erases their final struggles from history. For the submariners, this fate was always present, always possible. Each dive was a descent into uncertainty. Each mission carried the risk that they would never surface again. And for those who did vanish, their absence remains as haunting as their presence once was. They are not merely statistics of war. They are mysteries men who slipped into the abyss, their stories untold, their silence eternal. This is the abyss, the black void beneath the waves, where pressure crushes, light dies, and silence reigns. It is both battlefield and graveyard, a place that has swallowed hundreds of submarines, thousands of souls, and countless stories that the surface world will never hear. In the darkness below, they remain, waiting, forgotten and unseen. The Second World War consumed the oceans with a hunger unlike any before. Beneath the battles fought on land and in the skies, another conflict unfolded in silence. A war within a war. Submarines, the hunters of the deep, slipped beneath the waves to stalk convoys, to strangle supply lines, to deliver sudden, unseen death. Yet as they claimed victories, they themselves were claimed. For every ship they sent down, the ocean took submarines in return. And their stories became whispers, half recorded, half erased, hidden behind the veil of secrecy and silence. The records are sparse, sometimes no more than a line of ink. A name, a date, a single word, missing. Yet behind every word lies an entire crew, leaves extinguished without farewell. These are the ghosts of World War II, the submarines that never returned. The HMS Thetis was one of the first. In 1939, before the war had fully ignited, she went out to sea on trials, her steel hull gleaming with the pride of a navy preparing for conflict. But pride was not enough to save her. A torpedo tube malfunctioned during a dive, flooding compartments in seconds. Panic spread as water rushed in. The air grew thick, suffocating, while the steel coffin filled. Out of 103 men aboard, only 4 survived. The rest were trapped, their bodies entombed in the vessel, meant to carry them to glory. The Thetis never even tasted war. Her legacy was silence and death before the first shots rang across Europe. When the conflict expanded, the seas became battlefields of shadows. German U-boats haunted the Atlantic, terrorizing convoys, their presence a constant specter for Allied sailors. Yet the ocean claimed them just as ruthlessly. Some fell to depth charges, others to mechanical failure, and many more to mysteries that remain unsolved. More than 700 U-boats never returned. Their last transmissions ended abruptly. Their fates were left unwritten. To this day, many rest undiscovered, scattered across the seabed like forgotten gravestones. Each lost U-boat carried 50 men or more. Hardened sailors, veterans of a brutal war, confined in steel tubes no larger than a narrow corridor. Their lives ended not with the glory of battle, but with silence smothered in darkness, their bodies forever hidden from sunlight. The Atlantic became a graveyard, and within its endless waters lie thousands of German souls whose names were recorded, but whose fates remain unknown. The United States bore its share of shadows. The USS Grunion, fresh into service, disappeared during a patrol in the Aleutian Islands. Messages had flowed in for days, sightings, attacks, reports of successful strikes. Then silence. For decades, her fate was a question mark, her crew erased from history's memory. When her wreck was finally found in the silt of the Bering Sea, it told a story of desperation. A torpedo, possibly malfunctioning, had circled back upon its creators. In one instant, victory turned to annihilation. The Grunion's crew remained entombed, their lives sealed in rust and salt water. In the Pacific, the USS Wahoo, commanded by the fearless Dudley Mush Morton, had become a legend. Her attacks were daring, her victories celebrated. Yet legends die as easily as men. On her final patrol, Japanese aircraft and escorts trapped her, forcing her down. Depth charges thundered through the sea, and then silence. For years, her fate was uncertain, pieced together only from enemy records. Decades later, divers found her shattered hull, a mute monument to her final battle. For Japan, the war beneath the waves was even more merciless. Submarines, such as the I-52, carried not just weapons, but secrets, treasure, and hope. The I-52 was bound for Germany in 1944, laden with gold, strategic metals, and coded intelligence meant to strengthen two crumbling empires. But American patrols intercepted her. Depth charges tore her open in the dark. She sank swiftly, her cargo lost, her crew erased. When her wreck was discovered 50 years later, it revealed not just gold glimmering in the silt, but desperation, an empire's final gamble, drowned in silence. The ocean is not generous with answers. For many submarines, no wreck has been found, no debris recovered. They are simply gone, missing as though swallowed whole. The abyss offers no explanations, only silence. Governments, too, turned the page in silence. Families received vague notices, missing in action, failed to return. No detail, no closure, no truth. The dead were buried not with ceremony, but with bureaucracy. Even in war's aftermath, secrecy lingered. Some losses were locked behind classified seals, their records withheld for decades. Submarines had not only carried men, but technology, codes, and intelligence too valuable to expose. Admitting how they were lost was to admit vulnerabilities, failures, or secrets never meant for public eyes. So the vanished crews remained shadows, their fates unspoken, their names tucked into the forgotten margins of history. And still, the ocean remembers. It holds the Thetis, the USS Grunion, the USS Wahoo, the Japanese I-52, and hundreds more. It holds the remains of more than 50 American submarines lost in the war, more than 3,500 sailors who never returned. It holds the ghosts of 700 German U-boats and the thousands entombed within. It holds the Japanese submarines, their crews, their treasure, their desperation. And it holds silence. For those left behind, the silence was a different kind of death. Wives who waited by the shore, children who asked for fathers who never returned, parents who clutched letters written from the sea. Their grief had no grave to visit, no headstone to touch, no body to bury. Their mourning was endless, because the ocean had taken everything and given back nothing. The war above the waves ended with victory parades, treaties signed, flags raised over ruined cities. But below the surface, the war has never ended. Its dead remain where they fell, unburied, unseen, and often unknown. The submarines that disappeared are not relics of battle. They are tombs. They are monuments of rust and steel, guarded by darkness, whispered to only by currents and the slow crawl of time. Decades later, when technology advanced, expeditions sought out these lost vessels. Sonar revealed shapes unnatural to the seafloor, long, narrow shadows, broken spines of metal. Cameras descending into the abyss revealed corroded hulls, shattered bulkheads, silent torpedo tubes pointing into the void. Yet even these discoveries could not truly uncover their stories. No one alive had witnessed their final moments. No survivor spoke their fate. All that remained was speculation, silence, and the quiet testimony of wreckage. The ocean does not forget. Its memory is perfect, preserved in pressure and cold. The submarines of World War II lie where they fell, each one a ghost story carved into steel. Their crews breathe no more, but their presence lingers in the silence, in the currents, in the shadows that move across the seabed. The ghosts of World War II are not folklore. They are history buried in darkness, history hidden by secrecy, history remembered only by the abyss. And as long as their wrecks remain unseen, as long as their families never knew the truth, they remain ghosts still waiting to be acknowledged. The ocean is their grave, the silence is their epitaph, and the world, though it may forget, cannot erase them. For beneath the waves, in the places where light does not reach, the ghosts of World War II endure. The guns of World War II had fallen silent, but the oceans did not rest. A new war began, one fought not with open battles, but with shadows, silence, and fear. The Cold War transformed the deep sea into a hidden chessboard where every move was cloaked in secrecy, and every mistake was buried beneath the waves. Submarines became the invisible pawns of superpowers, carrying weapons capable of ending the world in minutes. Yet in their pursuit of dominance, they too became victims of the abyss. The USS Thresher was the pride of American engineering, nuclear-powered, unstoppable, a machine meant to project unmatched strength. But in April 1963, the pride of the Navy descended beneath the Atlantic waves and never returned. More than 100 men disappeared in silence, swallowed by the deep. The official report spoke of mechanical failure, of a leak, of systems overwhelmed by the crushing pressure. But in the corridors of Washington, whispers spread. Some said it was sabotage. Others believed the truth was buried to shield reputations, to protect programs too costly to expose. The wreck, scattered across the seafloor, became not just a grave, but a reminder. Technology bends beneath the weight of the ocean, no matter how advanced. Across the globe, the Soviet K-129 prepared for its mission in 1968, carrying nuclear warheads on a voyage across the Pacific. The submarine set sail into the silence, but its signal went dark. For days, the Soviets searched. Official reports admitted little. Families were told even less. The ocean had claimed another vessel, another crew, but the story did not end in silence. American intelligence tracked the lost submarine to a patch of ocean thousands of miles away. What followed was one of the most secret operations of the Cold War. With staggering resources, the CI attempted to raise the wreck from the seafloor using a vessel disguised as a mining ship. The project, codenamed Azorian, recovered fragments of the submarine and its dead, but the full truth of what was found remains classified. Some said the submarine sank from an explosion within. Others whispered of collision, sabotage, even mutiny. The wreck became both a trophy and a curse, a secret neither side dared speak aloud. But not every mystery could be hidden. In 1968, the French submarine Minerve vanished during routine exercises. One moment it was in communication, the next it was gone, without warning, without explanation. For decades, families mourned with no wreck to grieve over. It was only in 2019, more than 50 years later, that the submarine was found, broken upon the seabed. What had happened was still unclear, but for the families, the silence was finally pierced by the echo of truth. Each disappearance during this era carried a dual weight: human tragedy and political paranoia. Every wreck risked secrets falling into enemy hands. A submarine lost at sea was not merely a grave, it was intelligence, weapons, and codes, all waiting to be discovered by rivals. And so the search for wrecks was not an act of mercy, but of strategy, a desperate race to claim what the deep had consumed. Even the Soviet K-219, lost in 1986, bore the hallmarks of this paranoia. Struck by disaster off the coast of Bermuda, the submarine suffered a catastrophic missile explosion. Crewmen fought desperately to contain the damage, but the vessel slipped into the depths. Survivors spoke of chaos, of flames and choking smoke, of men sacrificed to delay the inevitable. Official accounts minimized the danger. Yet it was known. Nuclear warheads had been lost to the sea, sealed in a tomb of steel. To this day, they rest beneath the waves, a reminder that the Cold War's weapons were never entirely under control. Throughout these years, families received nothing but fragments of truth. Some were told only that their loved ones were missing at sea. Others were given elaborate tales that concealed more than they revealed. The ocean became the perfect vault for secrets too dark to be spoken. A vanished submarine was both tragedy and opportunity, something to mourn, but also something to hide. Governments framed disappearances as accidents, as mechanical failures, as the unavoidable price of progress. But within intelligence agencies, each event was a puzzle piece. What did the enemy know? What had truly gone wrong? Could wreckage be raised? Could secrets be kept? The paranoia of the Cold War turned every disappearance into a battlefield, one fought in silence beneath miles of crushing order. To this day, many questions remain unspoken, buried under layers of classification and silence. The wrecks of the Cold War are not merely relics, they are shadows, lingering reminders of an era where silence was strategy, and the abyss itself was a player in the game. Submarines built to strike unseen became ghosts themselves. Their missions ended not in triumph, but in silence. Their crews, erased from the surface of the world, joined the countless dead already claimed by the sea. The oceans of the Cold War are still haunted, not just by the wreckage of steel, but by the unspoken truths they conceal. Beneath the waves lie secrets too dangerous to surface, secrets of nations, of weapons, of men. And with every vanished submarine, the abyss claimed not just lives, but history itself. There are graves we are allowed to see, monuments of marble, names carved into stone, histories told in daylight. And then there are graves hidden in silence, buried in secrecy, erased from the record by those who feared what the truth might reveal. Beneath the oceans, submarines lie in classified graves, their wreckage chained not only to the seafloor, but to the archives of governments who sealed away their stories. When a submarine vanished, the first casualty was the truth. Reports were written, but words were changed. Families were briefed, but only with what was convenient. The ocean swallowed steel and flesh, while bureaucrats swallowed the facts. Some losses were explained away as routine accidents. Others were struck from records altogether, as if they had never existed. For many, the warships became myths, rumors whispered among sailors, fragments hinted at in redacted documents, shadows cast across history. The USS Scorpion remains one of the most infamous of these classified graves. In May 1968, it failed to return from patrol. The official cause was never revealed. A torpedo detonation, mechanical failure, or even a catastrophic internal explosion were all offered as possibilities, but none confirmed. Classified documents suggest surveillance picked up strange acoustic events in the mid-Atlantic, sounds of a vessel tearing apart under immense pressure. Yet the government withheld the recordings for decades. Families were told little more than lost at sea. Even now, the precise cause remains a state secret, entombed as deeply as the submarine itself. The Soviet Union was no less ruthless in its silences. Submarines that embarked on missions too sensitive to admit were quietly erased from the record when they did not return. In some cases, the crew's existence was almost denied, as though entire groups of men had been struck from life itself. Wrecks discovered decades later told stories that documents never dared to reveal. Broken hulls bearing the scars of explosions, reactor meltdowns, collisions that could not be admitted without exposing national failures. The ocean became a dumping ground, not only for ships, but for truths too dangerous to surface. The pattern stretched across nations. In 2000, the Russian submarine course suffered a catastrophic explosion during naval exercises. For days, officials claimed rescue operations were underway. In reality, delays, denial, and mismanagement sealed the fate of the trapped crew. Families were fed shifting explanations. The truth that the men were left to die while governments argued over blame was slow to emerge. And even then, not the whole story. Classified details about the weapons it carried and the failures in its systems remained sealed, leaving relatives with fragments of truth too jagged to hold. Every classified grave carries the weight of betrayal. These men went to sea under flags they trusted, serving missions they were not allowed to question. Yet in death, their loyalty was repaid with silence. Official reports became riddles filled with omissions, blacked-out pages, and contradictions. Investigations were not meant to reveal, but to obscure, to protect reputations and secrets rather than the dignity of the dead. And so families became prisoners of uncertainty. Mothers, fathers, wives, and children stood before officials who recited half-truths with steady voices, promising closure they could never give. Some received medals, others received folded flags. None received the truth. For decades, they carried questions that governments refused to answer, knowing that the answers lay sealed in vaults marked classified, while the remains of their loved ones rested in steel coffins, miles beneath the surface. The ocean itself became complicit in this silence, its depths used as the perfect cover for denial. Unlike the battlefields on land, there were no witnesses here, no photographs, no graves to visit. Only water, pressure, and darkness. The sea made secrecy effortless, turning every disappearance into a blank page that could be rewritten however those in power chose. And yet, the dead are not so easily erased. Decades later, wrecks are discovered, their battered forms testifying to stories governments tried to bury. The truth is etched into twisted steel, into shattered hulls, into the silence of compartments where men once waited in the dark. These graves do not lie. They only wait, patiently, for the day when light finally reaches them. But even when the wrecks are found, the story is rarely complete. Images are released in fragments, reports cut short, explanations delivered in careful tones that reveal nothing of substance. The classified label lingers, ensuring that even in death, these crews remain trapped in the service of secrets. The abyss becomes their coffin, and bureaucracy their headstone. In these classified graves, silence is not just a consequence of the sea. It is enforced, deliberate, and calculated. Power chooses what is remembered and what is erased. For those lost beneath the waves, it means their final story is not one of heroism or tragedy, but of concealment. Their lives became secrets. Their deaths became forbidden knowledge. And so the ocean floor is littered with monuments no one can visit, marked only by the weight of secrecy. Each submarine is not only a wreck, but a locked archive, a forbidden chapter in history sealed away from the living. Their resting places whisper of betrayal, of silence chosen over truth, of governments that buried not just their dead, but their dignity. The men who rest there are not forgotten, but they are not remembered honestly, either. Their graves are classified, their stories forbidden, their silence eternal. There are places on the ocean where silence is never empty. The sonar screens tell stories that human eyes cannot see, blips that appear and vanish, echoes that respond where nothing should be, signals that pulse like heartbeats from an abyss that has none. Sailors spoke of these whispers in the depths, half believing them to be errors, half certain they were not alone. For every submarine that vanished, there were those who remembered strange readings in the hours before. Operators recorded metallic echoes without a source, movements too fast and fluid for any known vessel. Some described signals breaking into fragments, as though another presence interfered with the waves themselves. And when the ocean returned to silence, so too did the vessel, never surfacing, never returning. The stories spread in hushed tones through naval circles. In mess halls and on night watches, sailors told tales of phantom submarines that shadowed their course. Sometimes they appeared as ghostly shapes on radar, keeping pace, impossible to identify. Sometimes they emerged only as pressure shifts, a vibration in the steel, as though something vast moved just beyond reach. Officers dismissed the stories as superstition, as the natural paranoia of men surrounded by crushing darkness. But legends have their roots, and these legends began with those who heard the whispers themselves. The Soviet submarine K-129 was one such legend. Officially, it sank far north in the Pacific. Yet years later, fragments were discovered thousands of miles from its reported course. Some insisted it had been moved, or that another power had tampered with its remains. Others whispered that it had strayed into waters where navigation faltered, where instruments failed, where the ocean itself seemed to bend the truth. The details never aligned, and the contradictions only deepened the unease. The Americans, too, carried their own stories. USS Thresher was said to have sent strange sonar pings before it fell silent, signals cut off mid-transmission as though swallowed whole. Hydroacoustic monitors later recorded implosion sounds, a sudden crushing roar in the deep. But among those who studied the tapes, some swore they heard more, a faint metallic rhythm before the final collapse, a pattern not made by any known submarine. The reports were filed away, marked as anomalies, but the men who listened remembered. In the 1970s, classified hydrophone stations in the Atlantic and Pacific reported what they could not explain. Signals appeared where no vessel should have been, repeating in intervals, vanishing without trace. Some were dismissed as ice-breaking, others as seismic activity. Yet trained ears insisted the tones carried intent, rhythm, even intelligence. In an age of secrecy and suspicion, every unexplained sound became suspect. But the recordings clipped, grainy, unsettling hinted at something else, something beyond the reach of nations or technology. Among sailors, the legends grew darker. They spoke of submarines that disappeared not in storms, not in battle, but in calm seas beneath clear skies. Wrecks later found lay hundreds of miles from their last reported positions, as though carried by unseen hands. Hulls bore scars no torpedo or implosion could explain: bent steel, torn plating, fractures that looked less like destruction and more like something pressing from without. For every official explanation, there was always a murmur of disbelief. The whispers became ghost stories. The sea, they said, had guardians, forces that resented intrusion. Depths where steel was not welcome, where the ocean took back what men dared to send. Some swore they felt presences when they descended too far, an unseen weight pressing against the hull. Others spoke of sonar operators going pale, insisting they heard voices in the noise fragments of words, patterns like breath, a mimicry of human sound that could not be real. Governments denied it, as they denied everything that strayed beyond reason. Reports were stamped and shelved, testimonies classified, tapes locked away. But sailors are not so easily silenced. Their whispers spread across fleets, across generations, until they became part of the culture of the sea. Not all who serve believe them, but all who serve know them. The abyss is not empty. It is filled with pressures beyond comprehension, with movements unseen, with echoes that return not as reflections, but as answers. In those depths, submarines are fragile intruders, vessels of flesh and steel, daring to trespass in a realm that does not forgive. When they vanish, perhaps it is not always failure, not always accident, not always human error. Perhaps the ocean keeps what it chooses, and the whispers are warnings unheeded. The wrecks remain as evidence broken, displaced, scarred by mysteries never explained. Official records offer words like mechanical failure and navigational error, but steel does not twist itself. Signals do not invent their own echoes. The silence left behind does not erase the moments before disappearance, when something stirred beneath the calm. Whispers in the depths are more than stories. They are the voices of a graveyard still unfinished, a reminder that the ocean holds more than secrets. It holds intentions we cannot name. And so submarines continue to vanish, leaving behind only fragments of sound, ghostly traces on sonar, and sailors who swear the abyss speaks back. The governments may seal the files. The ocean may bury the steel, but the whispers endure, carried through the fleets like omens. For those who dare to descend into the darkness, it is a truth too heavy to ignore. The sea is not silent, and it never forgets. The silence of the sea did not end with the men it consumed. It followed them home, carried into kitchens, bedrooms, and front porches, where families waited for news that never came. Beyond the steel halls and military reports were mothers who never saw their sons again, children who grew up staring at photographs, wives who lived half their lives with the space beside them left unfilled. For those on land, the grief of submarine warfare was unlike any other. Soldiers killed in battle returned in coffins draped in flags, their names etched into stone. But for the families of the lost submariners, there were no graves to visit, no bodies returned, no final words to hold on to. The ocean kept its dead, and governments, bound by secrecy, offered only silence in return. Telegram boys walked up driveways with folded notes stamped, "Missing in action." That phrase became a curse, ambiguous, cruel, a denial of closure. Missing meant hope for some, torment for others. The days became weeks, the weeks became years. Wives kept lights burning in windows, children asked questions that could not be answered, and parents grew old wondering whether their sons had died in agony or drifted somewhere beneath the waves, waiting for recognition that never came. The weight of uncertainty crushed as much as grief itself. A widow of a lost American submarine once said, "It is like mourning a ghost. You are told to grieve, but you are not told where they are." Her words spoke for thousands across nations divided by war, but united in sorrow. The silence was universal. Japanese mothers lit incense before empty shrines. German widows wore black for husbands whose fates were classified. Russian families were handed medals but denied the truth. Across continents, the ocean had no language, only absence. Governments, fearful of panic and eager to control narratives, often offered little more than official vagueness. Reports spoke of mechanical failures and presumed losses. Rarely were the final moments described. Rarely was the full truth shared. Families learned to live with euphemisms instead of facts. "Lost at sea" became a phrase repeated like scripture, a sentence written to erase both detail and dignity. Some families became detectives, searching archives, writing letters, begging for information. They scoured newspapers, listened for whispers, clung to rumors that their loved ones had been captured, survived, or simply lost their way home. Most found nothing but locked doors and sealed files. A few were lucky enough to learn of wrecks discovered decades later, but by then, their grief had calcified into something heavier than mourning. The ocean had long since claimed its due. The loss extended beyond the immediate. Children grew up in households defined by silence. Their fathers reduced to names engraved on plaques, their absence shaping every corner of their lives. Generations later, descendants still speak of the missing as if they were there, grandfathers they never met, stories left unfinished, a shadow over family trees. In this way, the war beneath the waves did not end with treaties. It lingered, written into bloodlines, whispered across time. There were moments when families gathered together, seeking strength in shared sorrow. Memorials were built on land, cenotaphs for the nameless dead, where widows and children laid flowers on stone markers that bore no bodies beneath them. At sea, navies declared wrecks to be war graves, sanctuaries never to be disturbed. Yet these gestures, however solemn, could not erase the truth, that for the families left behind, their loved ones remained trapped in darkness, unreachable, unreturned. The ocean offered no mercy. For those who lost men to the abyss, storms and tides became reminders of what lay beneath. The sound of waves could stir both comfort and dread. Some found solace in imagining their husbands or sons resting in eternal peace beneath the currents. Others were haunted by visions of steel tombs and final moments of terror. Between those two extremes lay a wound that never healed. The submarine, once hailed as the weapon of the future, became in memory the coffin of the past. Its silence, celebrated in war, became silence in grief. The families who lived through it carried burdens beyond medals, beyond patriotic speeches, beyond the reach of history books. They carried the absence of voices they once heard daily, laughter that once filled homes, the promise of return that was broken not by choice, but by the abyss. The families left behind are the human face of the lost submarines. They remind us that beneath every number in a casualty list There were people whose lives were dismantled in an instant. Behind every vanished submarine were dozens of men with wives and children, whose futures were rewritten by silence. And behind every silence was a story denied by the sea, by governments, by the nature of war itself. The abyss keeps its dead. But on land, the memory lingers, carried not only in official histories, but in private grief. The tears shed behind closed doors, the portraits kept on mantels, the quiet prayers whispered each night. These are the echoes of submarines that vanished without a trace. The ocean buried the men, but their families bore the weight of that burial for generations. And so the story of the lost submarines is not only one of steel and secrecy. It is also one of flesh, of blood, of hearts left broken in the wake of silence. To speak of the submarines is to speak of them too, the wives who never remarried, the children who never forgot, the parents who went to their graves still waiting. They are the other half of the story, the half the sea could not bury. For decades they lay in darkness, forgotten machines of war, resting silently on the ocean floor, their steel hulls sealed by pressure and time. Submarines once filled with voices, movements, and human breath, now reduced to hollow monuments in the deep. The sea had claimed them without witness, and for generations they remained untraceable, existing only as rumors, lost coordinates, and unanswered telegrams. Families grew old waiting for word that never came, while governments buried files beneath locks and stamps of secrecy. But in the modern age, the ocean has begun to give up its dead. The invention of deep-sea drones, remote submersibles, and advanced sonar transformed the bottom of the sea from an unreachable abyss into a map slowly being drawn. With each expedition, explorers and naval search teams began to uncover what was hidden. Out of the gloom emerged the silhouettes of submarines, thought-gone forever submarines entombed, preserved like fossils of war. When the wreck of the Soviet submarine K-129 was rediscovered, the world saw more than just metal. It saw the impossible resilience of secrecy. Found thousands of miles from its reported last position, the submarine raised questions darker than its cold grave. Was it sabotage? A navigational error? Or something deliberately erased from history? Its discovery gave no answers, only more silence, heavier than before. The USS Indianapolis II emerged from the abyss, though technically not a submarine, but a heavy cruiser lost to torpedoes in 1945. For decades, her final resting place eluded all who searched. Survivors had drifted for days in the open sea, hundreds swallowed by sharks, heat, and despair. Their testimony told of where the ship had fallen, yet the wreck was nowhere to be found. When she was finally discovered, resting more than 18,000 feet below the surface, she appeared eerily preserved, her wounds visible but her silence intact. For those who had waited 70 years, there was some measure of closure, yet the discovery carried a bitter aftertaste. How could such a colossal vessel, carrying such weight in history, have vanished without a trace for so long? Submarine wrecks, more than surface ships, hold an almost unbearable gravity. They are tombs that have never been disturbed, sealed chambers still containing the remains of entire crews. To see them illuminated under the lamps of robotic explorers is to peer into a cemetery untouched by time. Portholes stare back like hollow eyes. Steel ribs collapse inward, echoing the violence of their final moments. Each rediscovery is both revelation and desecration closure for some, but torment for others, who realize the dead have been sleeping there all along, just beyond reach. The Kursk is another name whispered with unease. In 2000, the Russian submarine suffered an explosion and sank, trapping its crew beneath the Barents Sea. Though it was not lost for decades, its rediscovery and recovery efforts became infamous, televised fragments of a tragedy unfolding in real time. The hull revealed not only the scale of destruction, but also the haunting evidence that some sailors had survived for hours after the initial blast, scrawling desperate notes to loved ones in the darkness, waiting for a rescue that never came. The Kursk was never truly lost, but when she was raised, she carried with her the same unbearable aura as her vanished predecessors. A tomb torn open, secrets reluctantly exposed. Every rediscovery unsettles the narrative written by official records. The USS Scorpion, another American submarine lost during the Cold War, was discovered resting deep in the Atlantic. Yet the condition of the wreck contradicted official explanations. Its systems appeared strangely intact, its placement off course, its demise unexplained. Documents told one story, the wreck another. Between them lies the same silence that has haunted every submarine disappearance, a silence not born of waves, but of withheld truths. Technology has brought light to these abyssal graves, yet with light comes disquiet. Each wreck, instead of answering questions, magnifies them. Why were some submarines discovered in waters they should never have reached? Why were compartments undamaged, systems untouched, even as crews perished? Why did governments deny their locations long after their graves had been found? The ocean, impartial and eternal, does not conspire, but men do. And it is men who decide what truths are spoken and what are left to rust in darkness. When explorers descend to film these tombs, they find not only artifacts of steel, but artifacts of secrecy. Sealed hatches remind us of final, futile struggles. Empty compartments seem staged, almost too clean, as if death itself had been edited. It is in these details that the mystery deepens. For the families, rediscovery is a double-edged gift. A grave, at last, to name and to mourn, but also confirmation of what they already feared, that their loved ones lay in silence, not in battlefields or memorial cemeteries, but beneath crushing tons of seawater. The wrecks, once unknown, become both sacred sites and contested evidence. Some wish them left untouched, inviolate. Others demand full exploration, seeking the truths their governments denied them. And so the rediscovered submarines sit in darkness still, cameras passing briefly, beams of light disturbing their eternal night before withdrawing again. They remain monuments, but not monuments of victory or defeat, monuments of unanswered questions. The ocean has revealed them, but it has not explained them. In their rediscovery lies a cruel paradox. We see them now more clearly than ever, and yet they remain more enigmatic than when they were lost. Each submarine, each ship, each steel coffin holds a story unfinished, a narrative deliberately fragmented. The ocean is no longer the sole keeper of their secrets. The silence is now shared, held in archives, in vaults, and in the lips of those who still choose not to speak. What the ocean gives back, it does not give freely. It offers graves dressed as riddles, closure dressed as suspicion. These rediscovered tombs are not just the end of journeys, but the beginning of deeper mysteries. And in the stillness of the deep, the questions that cannot be asked and the answers that will not be given remain suspended forever. The submarines have been found, but they are not truly known. There are names inscribed on plaques, dates etched into memorial stones, and ships christened in remembrance. But there are also silences, vast, unbroken, suffocating silences that echo louder than any cannon fire or explosion. The silences belong to the submarines that never returned, whose steel carcasses were never rediscovered, whose men remain uncounted beneath miles of salt water and silt. The ocean, immense and indifferent, swallows without mercy. It keeps what it takes. And it has taken many. Some losses are recorded only as vanishing signals, blips on sonar that fade into nothing, final radio calls abruptly cut short. Others disappear in calm seas, without storms, without enemies in pursuit, without even the sound of a rupture. Entire vessels, advanced marvels of engineering, vanish as though erased from existence. These are not merely wrecks. They are absences, gaps in the fabric of history. Decades of naval archives record the same haunting phrase: presumed lost with all hands. Presumed because no proof exists. Presumed Because the ocean guards its dead, so tightly that even nations with satellites piercing the sky and machines diving into the abyss cannot find what was taken. Presumed, because certainty is impossible. The missing are not few. They form a long shadowed list that stretches across continents and wars. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Arctic Circle to equatorial waters, there are submarines unaccounted for British, American, Russian, Japanese, French, Chinese. Not relics of a distant age, but modern vessels, some lost in the very decades when mankind had already walked on the moon. Technology could reach the stars, but it could not reclaim the shadows beneath the waves. The USS Cyclops, a ship, not a submarine, but bound to the same mystery. She disappeared in 1918 with over 300 souls, vanishing into the Bermuda Triangle with no wreckage, no distress call, no survivor. If a vessel that vast could be erased, how much easier for the silent hunter of the deep. The lesson lingered. Even giants leave no trace when the sea decides. Submarines like the French Minerve and Eurydice slipped beneath Mediterranean waters, never resurfacing. For years, families waited for news. Decades passed before their wrecks were even glimpsed. Others have never been glimpsed at all. They remain names in records, unanswered telegrams, and faded photographs on mantelpieces. And still, the list grows heavier. The USS Scorpion, though eventually discovered, was for long years thought to be another name on that list of the abyss. The Soviet K-129 likewise drifted in rumor before her discovery. But there are many more that have never emerged from rumor at all. Submarines that left port, acknowledged their orders, descended into blackness, and never again returned to the surface world. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension. Beneath its surface lies terrain more alien than the surface of Mars' mountain ranges, trenches, valleys deeper than Everest is tall. In such a wilderness, a single submarine can disappear without trace, as easily as a single grain of sand lost in a desert. Even the most advanced sonar, sweeping the abyss with precision, may miss a wreck that lies buried under silt, broken across cliffs, or concealed within trenches where light has never traveled. And so they remain missing, not destroyed in spectacle, not commemorated in detail, but simply gone. Their absence unsettles the human mind because it suggests a truth more frightening than war or disaster: erasure. For the families, this erasure is a cruelty beyond imagining. To lose a son, a husband, a father, is pain enough. To never know how, where, or when to never have a grave to touch, a wreck to point to, is to endure grief without shape. It is grief without end. They are denied not only answers, but even the finality of certainty. Their mourning stretches across decades, bound not to memory, but to absence. Governments, too, carry their silences. Some claim ignorance, others hide behind secrecy. Files vanish as easily as the submarines themselves, and explanations are buried beneath classified seals. The abyss provides cover for more than just wrecks. It provides cover for lies, for incompetence, for failure too great to confess. The fear is not merely that submarines can be lost. The fear is that they can be forgotten, that steel, blood, and sacrifice can be erased from memory as completely as they are from sight. In that forgetting lies the ultimate terror, that men can vanish not only from the living, but from history itself. The abyss remains undefeated. For all our satellites, our drones, our sonar arrays, and nuclear-powered explorers, there are still shadows the human eye has never pierced. Entire submarines remain imprisoned in those shadows, their existence reduced to rumor, their crews reduced to whispers. Some will perhaps be found one day, revealed in eerie stillness like those already rediscovered, but many will not. The ocean is patient, and eternity is long. In that patience lies finality. The unknown is not an accident of time, nor merely a failure of technology. It is a reminder, heavy and inescapable, that mankind's reach has limits, that there are places our machines cannot yet touch, and truths our archives will never confess. The ocean has claimed them, and the ocean will keep them. Steel giants swallowed whole, their voices silenced, their stories erased. They will remain not as wrecks, but as void's emptiness in the records of war, absence in the annals of history. And so the list endures, unfinished, unclosed, unending. It is a list of men who are not only dead, but missing. A list of vessels that have become not relics, but myths. A list of questions that will never find answers. These are the unknown that remains. It begins and it ends with silence. Not the silence of peace, nor the quiet of sleep, but the silence of the abyss endless, crushing absolute. Beneath the waves, sound is swallowed, light is extinguished, and time itself seems to lose meaning. Submarines, once forged as emblems of power and dominion, sink into this silence as though they were nothing more than fragile shells of steel, fragile as the men who commanded them. They were meant to be hunters, shadows gliding unseen. They were hailed as invincible, their hulls crafted to resist the might of oceans, their arsenals capable of ending worlds. But for all the triumph of design and the pride of nations, the abyss has proven stronger. In the contest between human ambition and the eternal sea, the ocean never yields. Every vanished submarine is a paradox, a weapon meant to dominate reduced to a relic entombed. Their absence is not simply a loss of machines, but of voices hundreds of men silenced in an instant, consigned to a darkness no survivor could ever describe. Their last moments remain hidden, their final words unheard, their stories sealed by pressure and salt. And the governments that sent them forth often chose silence as well. Records classified, missions erased, truths buried as carefully as the wrecks themselves. Families left with foreign letters, vague phrases, and the void of unanswered questions. A silence imposed by power, echoing the silence of the sea. Two silences, intertwined, one natural, one man-made, both merciless. The ocean does not surrender its dead easily. Even with modern technology, even with sonar that maps the seabed and machines that descend into trenches, many submarines remain missing, erased from sight, erased from certainty. The abyss keeps its secrets. A submarine lost is rarely a submarine found. And when it is found, it is often decades too late, transformed into a rusting tomb that offers only new riddles instead of resolutions. These wrecks are not only graves, but monuments. They are monuments to the limits of human invention, to the fragility hidden beneath boasts of invincibility. Each submarine was once a marvel of its age, a vessel of cutting-edge power. Yet each was undone by a single miscalculation, a single flaw, or simply by the weight of the sea. The ocean does not negotiate. It does not forgive. In the end, what remains is not noise but stillness. No battle cries, no triumphant returns, no ceremonies, only silence. The silence of widows and children who never heard the truth. The silence of governments that preferred shadows over honesty. The silence of sailors entombed within pressure-crushed walls, their last breath stolen by the abyss. And the silence of the sea itself, vast and eternal. It is a silence that humbles, that mocks the notion of control. Humanity may have walked on the moon, split the atom, and conquered the skies, but beneath the waves lies a dominion we do not own. Submarines, in all their strength, serve as proof of this. They are monuments not of victory, but of surrender. The abyss remembers what humanity forgets. It remembers every hull, every crew, every spark of ambition that dared to defy its depths. It remembers, and it keeps them. What we call disappearance, the ocean calls possession. What we call tragedy, the ocean calls silence. As history advances and new submarines are built, the risk remains. The ocean has no memory of past losses, no mercy for future ones. It waits, patient, infinite, ready to claim again. For all our progress, for all our pride, we are still fragile creatures sailing fragile vessels across an abyss without end. The eternal silence is not only beneath the waves. It lingers above them too, in archives locked away, in conversations never held, in questions never answered. It is the silence of truths that may never be revealed, of mysteries that will outlive those who search for them. Submarines vanish, and in their vanishing, they become more than wrecks. They become symbols. Symbols of ambition turn to fragility. Symbols of secrecy turn to absence. Symbols of how even the strongest walls of steel crumble before the weight of the deep. The ocean holds them still. Rusting hulls scattered across mountains of silt. Caverns of steel where voices once echoed, now filled with nothing but water and time. They are lost, and in their loss, they belong to something larger than nations, larger than history. They belong to the abyss, and the abyss will not return them. So the film ends as it began, with silence. Not resolved, not explained, but eternal. The silence of the deep sea, the silence of concealment, and the silence of the forgotten. Together, they form a single truth. The submarines lost are not only wrecks, but eternal mysteries. The eternal silence endures, and in that silence, the abyss waits.